On the phone, we have one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history. I remember each of his Super Bowls vividly. He won with the Raiders. This guy just got it done time after time. Why he's not in the Hall of Fame? Only, I don't know, only those selectors know. Jim Plunkett. How you doing, Jim?
I'm great, thank you.
I see that you went to Stanford for college. That was a little before my time. Elliott remembers that. How did you end up choosing Stanford?
How did I choose Stanford?
Yes.
Well, I'm from San Jose, so I'm about 20 miles down the road, and with my family situation, they weren't well off. My mother was blind. My father was legally blind. I had to stay close to home. So it was the Cal, Stanford, or Santa Clara it really wound down to. Although I was recruited by many other schools across the country, I just felt the need to stay close to home and help my family out and yet get a good education and play some quality football. And Stanford seemed to be the right choice for me.
Did John Ralston recruit you personally?
He did. John was a good man, is a good man, although he's getting up there in age and has had some, difficulties. But, yeah, he had, a great personality. He was very energetic, very upbeat, and, he wound up being the guy I really wanted to play for. But he had quite a list of coaches, too, as well. Mike White was there, Dick Vermeil, Bill Walsh, Rod Rust, a lot of those guys obviously did very well, not only in college but as they went into the NFL. So he had quite a group of assistant coaches that also spent a lot of time with recruits. And those days it was just different. I'm not really up to date on the recruiting system that they use today, but it was more of a friendly atmosphere, it seemed to be. And anyway, they just made me feel wanted and felt I could help their program. And one of the things that was really important to me, I think, with Rod Rust, also being one of the recruiters, I had surgery right before I entered Stanford. I had thyroid tumors that had to be removed, and the doctor said I might not be able to ever play. And I called up Rod Rust on the phone and told him what was going on with me, that I still want to come to Stanford, but I may not be able to play football for you. And he said, that's okay. Your scholarship, you will get to keep your scholarship. Come to Stanford, whether you play for us or not. We want you to be there. And that's one of the things that's endeared me so much to Stanford University.
Very few colleges would do that. I mean, basically it's one and done.
Especially in those days, you're right. Yeah, you're right about that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
What did your parents think of the recruiting process?
My parents, they were not a very educated couple. As I said, my mother was totally blind, my father legally blind. They did well to raise 3 kids. We were on welfare. But, I guess the biggest thing that held us together was the love they had for their children. They did raise 3 kids, which I find incredibly an incredible feat. Considering between my wife and I, we have 2 kids, and that was hard enough, and we can see. And so they did an incredible job, and they put us all in the right direction. Made sure we went to school every day, provided lunch, did all the things most parents do for their children, and I give them a lot of credit, and I think it made me who I am today. Hardworking, stubborn, don't give up easily, those kinds of things. I got a lot of that from my parents, and they sacrificed everything for their children. They were great.
A lot of times people say when you can't see or you lose one sense, the other senses become stronger. Did you notice that, and did that kind of help you become a better quarterback?
Well, I don't know about that. I don't know if that translated, but my mother had a great sense of hearing, and for many years actually, or for a long time, especially when I was young, my mother would be sitting on a porch with a neighbor, and they would be talking, and I'd wave and say hi, Mom, and so my friends, as we were walking, see on the sidewalk, and she'd look up and wave back, and at first I didn't even know she was blind until I told my friends, but I don't know if that sense really related to me. I just I love sports all my life, whether it be baseball, football, basketball. I wrestled, I ran track. I did a little bit of everything. growing up. I just loved to compete, and I always wanted to get better. When I was really young, I was always the last guy picked for the baseball team on when we played in the streets, but I didn't like that so much. So I worked hard, tried to get better, whatever sport I was playing. It just drove me forward. I just wanted to be better than the next guy, and in many instances I accomplished that.
Growing up in hard times, did that create a work ethic in you?
Yeah, I think so. I think early on in my life, as a young boy, maybe even all the way to grammar school, I wanted a better life for me when I grew up. I didn't have to want to certainly rely on the government for money and other benefits. So it spurred me on. It spurred me to study hard in class and work hard on the athletic field or court or wherever I might be. But I just knew that down the road when I grew up, I was going to own my own house. We had to move every time they raised the rent. We just kept moving on and on as when I was young, let me put it that way. And so I strove to be the best I could be. When I was a kid, I just had to get out of that kind of life and provide. When I grew up, I was going to provide for my family, and I was going to be financially stable, and I was going to get my education. And if sports worked out, that was great. That would be great. But if it didn't, I still had an education to fall back on.
I see that John Ralston thought about switching to defensive end. That'd be tough for you because you were a quarterback your whole life, right?
In high school I played defense as well.
Okay.
I played in the high school all-star game. I didn't start at quarterback. I started at defensive end. So I did a little bit of both. But yeah, because my freshman year was just a catastrophe, coming off surgery on my neck. We had freshman football in those days. You didn't have 4 years of varsity. You only had 3. So I played on the freshman football team. Did not play very well. And at the end of spring practice, although I played quarterback, I did not perform very well there either. And Coach Ralston brought me in his office as he did to all players, and he sat down and talked to you what you had to work on over the summer, how to get better, what they expected from you back in the fall. And he said, Jim, you didn't perform very well as a quarterback, and we think you'd be better off at the defensive end. And I told Coach, to be honest, Coach, two things. Number one, I'd like another chance at being a quarterback. My situation. I came in here after surgery, not really the quarterback that you had recruited, and I'd like another chance. And number two, if you move me to a different position, I'll probably leave and go somewhere else. So, he gave me that opportunity. I worked very hard that summer, came back, and I was once again the quarterback they recruited out of high school. I was throwing the ball well. I was running well. I was doing all the things that they saw in me in high school. So, I got that turned around.
You must have been a pretty persuasive speaker. I can't imagine a whole lot of coaches changing their mind about a guy that they think isn't going to do well here and will do well there.
Well, I think Coach Ralston did see me play in high school. We were undefeated in high school. And so I think he saw a lot of things in me that it was one of the reasons why they recruited me so heavily. And John was a pretty open-minded guy, somewhat. Well, in certain instances, I will say, But and I'm very fortunate that he provided me that opportunity. I'm certainly thankful to him, and always will be, for giving me that chance. And it turned out extremely well for me and for him and Stanford. So it all worked out in the end. Let me put it that way.
I see that you took Stanford to their first Rose Bowl. And it mentions here that you guys had a wide open offense, which was very rare in the Pac-8 back then. Was that Coach Ralston's idea, or was that Coach White or Rust, or who came up with that idea to open up the offense?
Well, I think that when I first got there, they were a rollout, sprint out team. They were like the rest of the league. They ran the ball first, they sprinted out, throwing the short passes. When I got there, I wasn't exactly your rollout, spread out type of quarterback. I was bigger than most quarterbacks in those days, and I was a drop back passer, and that's what I excelled at. and Coach Ralston and the other coaches, including Mike White, who was the offensive coordinator, I guess you'd say, and offensive line coach. And, they saw that in order to be successful for me back there, they needed to change the offense. And we turned into a pro-style offense, by wide open offense. We had one wide receiver and, just two wide receivers and a tight end, no different than, other teams. But we were more of a drop-back passer. And, they saw that in me. They saw that I performed best in that kind of climate, although I did roll out and sprint out some, and I still ran quite a bit in college. But I'm a drop back passer. That's what I was then, and they kind of changed that offense to fit my style of play.
Now you had a chance to go to the NFL a year earlier than you did.
Right. Yeah.
Another Stanford quarterback more recently, Andrew Luck. You went back. What was the reason for all that? Because I'm certain you could have used the money a year earlier.
That was a consideration. Yeah, that was very much a consideration. Going out and helping my family and going to the NFL. But myself and I redshirted one year, my sophomore year, along with a couple of other friends of mine who got there at the same time, and we set a goal for ourselves. We wanted to get to the Rose Bowl, and we came up so short. On the last play of the game against SC, they kicked a field goal to beat us my junior year, and so we kind of made a pact. We were all going to come back and get to the Rose Bowl, which we did. We accomplished for the first time in 19 years. But I could have left early. I know the Colts were interested in drafting me because they called and talked, but I wanted to be a good example of, staying in school and getting my education, and that was also a factor as well. But, more than anything, I just want another crack at SC and another chance to get to the Rose Bowl. And in those days, it was much tougher. You could only go to one bowl game in the Pac-8, or Pac-8 back then. Every year I was there, we won, 6 games or more, but there was no bowl game to go if you didn't win your conference. So we were stuck. So, you had to win your conference to go to a bowl game. And so it was much more difficult back then, let me put it that way.
Yeah, nowadays it's almost as if, if you field a team, we'll find a bowl for you.
Yeah, pretty much, which I don't think is unfair. If you're 6-6, 50%, you qualify for a bowl, and I don't think that's right. It's something you should earn.
Definitely. What was it like when you won the Heisman? Because you had some pretty good competition. You had the Heisman.
Heisman and Archie Manning.
Yeah.
They're a good group, and there were some running backs back then too as well, who were all considered. But I feel very fortunate, to have the kinds of years and that final year at Stanford and going to the Rose Bowl and winning that, beating a team that would probably beat us 9 out of 10 times, but that day that we weren't to be denied. It was the thrill of my life. I love being at Stanford and my teammates, and to this day we're as close as any group of men could be. But it was just something that I certainly didn't try to win the Heisman. I just wanted to win games each and every week. But that was kind of the icing on the cake. It was a tremendous honor. I'm very proud of the fact, I'm still the only one at Stanford. Although I felt Andrew Luck had a tremendous chance to win it, and Toby Gerhardt over the last few years, and unfortunately they did not. But I take quite a bit of pride in the fact that I won the Heisman Trophy back in 1970.
And also, John Elway never won it either. You could throw that in his face.
I don't throw anything in anybody's face, He did not win very much at Stanford, to tell you the truth, although he did make the Heisman list. But, they were not a very good football team back then. Stanford was quite a bit up and down. They'd have some good years and some down years. And until recently, it's probably the longest string of a winning team they've had in a long time. It had been very difficult to win at Stanford on a consistent basis over the years, although obviously that has changed with Harbaugh and David Shaw at the helm right now. But, back then, it was tough to get the players that you wanted. And one of the things that Coach Ralston did back in the day was he recruited a lot of quarterbacks because, they usually had good grades and they were able to get in, unlike today where it seems like everybody has good grades. I don't think I can get into Stanford today, to tell you the truth. But what he did with the quarterbacks, he would move them to defensive back or wide receiver. So he found places for these guys to play. I think one of the things we lacked, and I'm not knocking my guys because I think they were, I wouldn't trade them for anything. But we weren't overwhelmingly big on offense. We didn't mow people down. We had to somewhat finesse. We tried to run the ball, but we had to somewhat finesse them and play a different kind of offensive ball than most teams in the Pac-10, like SC and some of the big powerhouses.
When the NFL draft came around, did you know you were going to be number one?
Yeah, I was pretty sure. New England was in contact with my agent quite a bit, and I knew I was going to New England pretty early.
So you were prepared to make that cross-country trip to play for the Patriots?
Yeah, I was thrilled about being drafted number one overall, going to a team that needed my help, and I didn't know I was going to start right away, but that's exactly what happened. I started from the get-go. As a rookie, I took every snap, didn't miss one single snap, although there were some times when I got knocked around, I wanted to miss a snap or two, but I just kept showing up and had some success as a rookie back in the day. And I wouldn't have had it any other way. I'm glad I got the opportunity. I did take a licking, but I also learned a lot.
Did teams look at you differently because of your heritage being Hispanic, that they felt that you wouldn't make a good quarterback under the old stereotype systems they had?
I don't know. If they did, I didn't see it. If you're not good, it shows up right away. And if you are good or you've got potential, that pretty much shows up as well. They took me for who I was. I got a lot of crap in the locker rooms, but on the field, not so much.
Did having Randy Vitaha, your former teammate at Stanford, ease the transition to the NFL?
Yeah, we weren't a very good football team back in 1970, and having Randy be there, he had been drafted by the Rams, and he was Mr. Irrelevant. He was the last guy picked, but they chose him in L.A. mostly for his publicity because he's a local guy. They cut him. We found him on a beach hungover. Said, "Come on, Randy, come on." Yeah, I talked to the coaches and the owner, and they wanted to sign you. So hopped in the plane, and we played together for 5 years in New England. And number one, it was great to have him there as a friend and someone we knew. We lived together for a couple of years. And then number two, he was quite an athlete, and he saved my bacon a lot, both at Stanford and in New England. So it worked out very well for me, for him, and for the Patriots.
I see that. Then you bounced around them. You went to the 49ers for a year, and then you went to the Raiders and were a backup. Did you think then, my career is probably over. I'm just going to finish as a backup with the Raiders?
Yeah, well, I was at San Francisco for 5 years in New England, 2 at San Francisco. Got released, which is probably the lowest point in my career. And took a drubbing in the press, and it was probably the most depressing point of my life at that time. And thinking, well, maybe these people are right. Maybe I should get out of football, go do something else, start a business or what have you. But then my friends and family supported me, said, it wasn't you, it was a situation you'd been in. Plus my agent got several phone calls from different teams around the country, and one of them being the Raiders across the bay, and I didn't want to pack up and leave again. So, I wound up signing with the Raiders, and you're right, I was on the bench for a couple of years. That was also very difficult behind a very good quarterback in Kenny Stabler. But after 1 year, I felt I was playing well again, and I asked to be traded in 1980 when they brought in Pastorini and they traded Stabler. But Al Davis wouldn't do it. He said I was the only experienced guy they had, but they were going to start Pastorini because they said they traded number one for number one. So, and then eventually he got hurt, and it was my opportunity, and I had to make the most of it because if I failed or came up short, I'd be out of football for sure. And fortunately, it worked out for me and for the Raiders.
Well, You ended up in Super Bowl 15 being the MVP, so
Right.
I think that qualifies as working out pretty well.
Yeah, no kidding. You know, then a couple of years later, we won the Super Bowl in '84 against the Redskins. So yeah, if I'd been on that team earlier in my career, who knows what would have happened? But you know, it just took a while, and it was quite a journey for me. You know, ups and downs, and but it was nice to finish up on top.
Did it help having Tom Flores as a coach, being that he was a former Raider quarterback, also of Hispanic heritage?
You know, I had Coach Madden that first year, and then Tom took over my second year there. You know, I don't know if the heritage helped out. Tom and I are great friends now. We see each other every week for all the Raider games. He does the radio. I do preseason radio and TV and a weekly TV highlight show. So we're around each other a lot. I think what really helped was his experience in the NFL. He was a quarterback. He'd been there, done that. He'd been on teams that weren't very good and teams that were pretty good. And you know, we had a good rapport with one another. I learned a lot from Tom. Patience, learning the Raiders system, which was quite different from anything I'd been exposed to in the NFL prior. And you know, he helped me out quite a bit. He gave me a lot of confidence in in their style of play, and so from that regard, from a coaching standpoint, he was terrific. You know, we had our differences because you know coaches and quarterbacks usually do. You know, they argue over play calling and stuff like that. But he was my boss. You know, he was my coach, and I was his player. But it worked out extremely well for the two of us, and today we're just great friends.
Was he your favorite coach to play under, or somebody else?
Oh no, it had to be him. You know, there's a lot of men I liked over the years, but you know, you have success, you do well with a certain coach. It makes him your best coach. Your best coach and a good friend.
What was it like playing for Al Davis? Because all the former Raiders Ellie and I have talked has said, once you're a Raider for life. Even if other teams forget about you, Al Davis never did.
Yeah, that's pretty much true. You know, he's that kind of guy. You know, you come in with a reputation for a lot of different things. You know, and Al didn't care about all that. He didn't care about the baggage you had. He just cared that you played well on Sunday, and for the most part, people did. You know, and a lot of guys that he brought in, you know, weren't necessarily at the end of their career. They just didn't get along with their coaches. They ran into some trouble, or they just didn't fit in. And Al was able to put this conglomerate of different personalities together, and they were all great players. I mean, I never had so much fun in my life as I did with these guys. And they expected to win each and every ball game. That was their attitude. And you probably know the history. It started with LaMonica and Stabler. And when I got there, it didn't matter what the score was. With 2 minutes to go, and the Raiders were behind, they'd find a way to win. It was just incredible the things that they accomplished, and that we were able to accomplish when I was there as well. Just tightened the chin strap a little bit more and did what they had to do, and more often than not, went home winners.
Did you have a favorite receiver to throw to?
Todd Christensen probably overall was my favorite receiver for a few years there. Bobby Chandler, unfortunately, we didn't have him very long. He got injured, but greatest hands. And Cliff Branch was always the big play guy for us down the football field. And then Marcus Allen was just, he could do everything and everything well. So you want to get the ball as much as you could to him, whether it be by the run or by the pass. But, Al provided all these guys. He believed in the deep ball, and somewhere during the game we were going to get it.
Would one of the Super Bowls have more meaning for you, was more important, or you felt was a better game for you?
Well, I obviously the first one. After struggling for 10 years, finally getting. I'd never even been to a playoff until that year in 1980. So, and to get there the way we did, having to win 3 playoff games, first wild card team ever to do it, and then to beat a team that had beaten us prior during the course of the year and just kicked our butt 10-7. But that Super Bowl certainly means the most to me. After all the ups and downs that I had getting there, that to this day means the most to me of the 2 Super Bowls. There's no question about that.
David and I have talked to a lot of former Raiders and former players and coaches in the NFL, and we're trying to figure out why Tom Flores isn't in the Hall of Fame and why you're not in the Hall of Fame.
Well, Tom certainly deserves to be. He won 2 Super Bowls. He's been on 2 other teams that have participated. He was an assistant coach in 1976 with the Raiders. He did a tremendous job with a group of guys that aren't so easy to coach sometimes. And he should be in there. There's no doubt about it. As for me, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it, but it would be a nice finish to, a long career. But I'll let somebody else worry about it.
I see one of the former Raider executives is up for the Hall of Fame, Ron Wolf. What do you think about Ron?
Oh, Ron's done a tremendous job in this league. He was Mr. Davis's right-hand man. He knows talent. He picks players that'll help you win. He did it with the Raiders, and he did it at Green Bay. So tremendous. I don't know what term you'd give him, scout, talent guy. But he knows his talent, and he provides players for coaches that help them win.
What I don't get with Lester Hayes is, did he wear that Stickum or use that Stickum during practices too, or was it just in games?
He wore it all the time. He drove me nuts because I hate to get it on the ball. I hate to get it in my hand, because then you can't throw the ball. He was a pain, but he's a lovable guy, and he was a great player. But he could do just as well without it. But him and Fred Biletnikoff both used that stuff until they banned it. He just Lester is Lester, and he'll do what he wanted to do. A great player, though, good guy, good friend.
Someone said that the reason the NFL banned it was because they were going through too many footballs.
Oh yeah, because you rub all that crap off of it. It was no fun, believe me. When you got it on the ball, and like Randy Vitaha used to use Stickum too, and he used to have long hair back in the day when we were in New England. And he'd say, "Plunk, push my hair back in my helmet," because he couldn't touch his, Jesus Christ. But they had their moments, though, those guys with a Stickum.
Yeah. Nowadays, receivers have gloves that have like Velcro or something. That they
pretty
wear.
much.
It's like, wait a second, if you could have had receivers that would never drop a pass because of the equipment, you'd probably be completing 65-70% of your passes.
Well, they do now anyway because of the style of play. It's a passing league now.
Right.
And let's see, unfortunately the Rams, took it to the Raiders Sunday, but probably what's his name, Sean Hill's first, probably 9 out of 10 passes weren't over 3 yards past the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage, and yet he tore us up. If we had that kind of offense back then, the numbers would be staggering.
The game I remember was a Raider-Bear game in 1984. They had to be the most physical game I ever saw. Quarterbacks were going down left and right for the Raiders.
Right.
That game, what do you remember about it?
Well, I didn't start. I was hurt going into the game, so I didn't play. Mark Wilson started. He got knocked out of the game. David Humm, the backup, he got knocked out of the game. And one time he came to the sideline and he says, "Here, Plunk, hold this," and he hands me a tooth. And then Mark Wilson goes back in the game, and then who was their quarterback? The Bears quarterback?
Jim McMahon and Steve Fuller.
Jim McMahon got knocked out of the game, and I guess he had a liver bruise or whatever. I mean, it was a hard-fought game. The Bears came out on top, but my God, you're right. It was one of the most brutal games I've ever witnessed.
Now, one of the honors you have received is Stanford retired your number 16, and
right.
you were the only the second Stanford player to have his number retired. The other one being the legendary Ernie Nevers.
Right.
What was that? What was that day like?
Oh, it was very exciting. My kids were young. We drove around in a car around the track. There used to be a track around the field. But it was a very nice honor, because at that time to be the second number retired at Stanford. Once again, he took a lot of pride. I said, I'm very thankful to Stanford. I've got a big place for Stanford in my heart. That's my whole, all my kids went through all their summer camps, in every sport. Very close to Stanford and the people who are part of Stanford. So it was a big thrill back then. It's a great honor, and as I said, I'm thrilled to have gone to Stanford and have met and been with the people that I've been with, both on the athletic field and off of it.
You have a vote for the Heisman. What do you think of a guy like Jameis Winston? Do you think character should go into whether you vote for someone for the Heisman?
Yeah, I do. I don't have to elaborate. There's so many things that go on.
Right.
And everybody's got a little baggage with them, but some of the things that go on today are quite extraordinary. But I do think it's part of it.
Do you anticipate a day when there'll be more Latino players in the NFL? I mean, there's a sprinkling nowadays, but
yeah, there are a few. Obviously Tony Romo is one of them. There are more and more. But Hispanics in general. I grew up with obviously in Hispanic neighborhoods, and for the most part, they weren't very big. I was an exception. I was bigger, taller than all my friends. That's just the way it was. But now, obviously, I'm trying to think. Max Montoya, and the guy who went to SC and played for Cincinnati. I can't think of his name. Who's in the Hall of Fame?
Anthony Munoz.
Yeah, there are a few, and they're getting bigger and stronger, and there'll be more to come. There's no doubt about it. But for and there aren't many Asians, because Asians, for the most part, aren't, big men. But that day's changing. My son turns into 6'6", my daughter's 6'1". So things change, believe me, and there'll be more great players coming out of the Hispanic community.